Want to learn how to make this? I can show you. And anyone who has a knitting machine can totally do this. From a complete beginner to someone who's really advanced, this is a great pattern for you. This pattern is specifically for the Brother KX350, which is a lovely knitting machine, but if you have any other kind of knitting machine, it can be very easily adapted to that as well. So, this pattern is very special, actually, because it means you can make this shirt in any size for your specific measurements, and the way that we do that is through a made-to-measure pattern. And any of you familiar with made-to-measure patterns know that there can be a lot of math involved, and lots of times we don't want to do that. It's complicated, it can get messy, and if you're wrong, it means a lot of rework. So I made a Google Sheets that will do all the math for you. All you need to know is your gauge and your measurements. And as always, you can find my pattern on Etsy at Real Studios. So go ahead and grab that and grab the Google Sheet that comes with it, and let's get started. So first things first, we need to take the measurements for our pattern. The bust circumference, this one is pretty standard. It's in a lot of patterns. You just want to take your measuring tape, wrap it around your back, wrap it around the fullest part of your chest, and that is the value. I also highly recommend you use centimeters. It's just a little more precise. Next, we need
Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this
so this will
baby tee
inform how
knit
long our front
shirt.
and back panels are. And since a raglan tee does this, like it creates kind of a boing shape, the topmost part of your panel is actually right here. So to measure this, what you want to do is you take your measuring tape and you find, let's use this shoulder that doesn't have the microphone, you find right where your neck is, straight down to your collarbone. And that is where the top of the shirt will end. Put your tape measure there, and then you just measure down as far as you want your shirt to go, and that will be your desired shirt length from collar. Now, write that down in your stitch calculator and take a mental note of where you wanted your shirt length to end. We're going to be measuring the bottom of your shirt to your sleeve seam. Now, usually the sleeve seam is like the armpit area, but every shirt is made differently. And most shirts, the actual sleeve seam ends like 1 inch to 2 inches below your armpit. So you don't want to measure all the way up to your armpit, because then you're gonna have a shirt that like hoists you up and is wicked uncomfortable, because that seam right there becomes rather inflexible. So once you seam it together, it's not really stretchy. It's a little stretchy, but not very much. So if you make it too small, wicked uncomfortable. And honestly, who wants to wear uncomfortable clothing? So make sure that you give yourself enough leeway to where it's bottom of where you thought it would be and not too tight up to your armpit. Kind of like here-ish is what I recommend, like mid-chest area. Another way you can check is I coded in to the calculator a little box, like a little cell, and that will double check whether you've made the value from your shirt top to the sleeve too small. I strongly recommend making sure that value is at least 25 to 23. Now for the desired collar circumference. This one is tricky because it's hard to measure around your own neck. I've done it, and it doesn't really work. I always end up with a super big or super small. So what I recommend is actually finding a shirt that you like and measuring the collar circumference from that shirt. So for example, if we took my purple shirt that I was wearing, what you would do is you would just lay it down flat, measure this length, and then double it, and that's your circumference. So I find that much easier. You can also technically Google this. This is a Googleable measurement because it's pretty standard across various sizes. And finally, for our last measurement, we're just going to do our upper arm circumference. So basically just take your measuring tape, wrap it around your bicep. You can flex if it doesn't really matter. I would recommend not flexing. And just take your measurement, and there you go, because that's going to be how wide your sleeve ends up being. Now you should have all your measurements, so just plug those into the baby tee calculator along with your gauge, and you should be ready to go.
So our first step for the actual knitting is to cast on our number of CO cast on stitches. So it's going to be 84. So how you read the pattern is cast on the desired number of cast on stitches CO. So then you want to find CO and then you use that for your number. So for me, that's 84 stitches. Because this is a made-to-measure pattern, the instructions are a lot simpler and all of the difficult stuff happens in the calculator section, which you guys don't even have to do. You just enter in your measurements, which I'll go over, and that out-pops a number for you to use. Now we're going to knit our 1 rows. So R1 for me was 42 rows, so I've knit 42 rows, and now I'm going to add stitch markers to both edges of our panel. Here we go. This is the main body portion that we just knit, and now we are going to work on the decreases up to the neckline. So for the next section, we are going to repeat this pattern until you have a total of RA rows. So generally, the number of repeats is half of RA rows because for every repeat we knit 2 rows. So first part of the repeat, knit 2 rows. And now the number of decreases on each side that we do is determined by dec 2 R1. If you're curious about my naming, dec 2 is we're going to decrease every 2 rows, and 1 is just like the first iteration of this. So in this case, I'm decreasing 2.5. And what a half means is I'm going to start by decreasing 3 on both sides, and then my next repeat, I'm going to decrease 2 on both sides. And I'm going to do that repeat until I get to the total number of rows that I got for RA, which is, for me, 14. So I'm going to have 7 repeats of this, right? Because 14 divided by 2. And you can also keep an eye on your row counter here if you don't want to do any math. Just be like, oh, I have to do 14 more. So I'm going to start, I knit 2, and now I need to decrease 3 on both sides. So I take my transfer tool, and I'm going to move out 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Take these 3 stitches, move them over, 1. So now we have 1 empty stitch. And now I do the same thing with the other groups of 3. So here's my 3, pull them off. This is the empty one, so we need to go 1 over, so we're always decreasing 1. So up there, and now we have 2 empty guys, and now we do the same thing on this last one over here. Okay, and now you can see we have reduced 3 stitches, and make sure those needles are pushed all the way back. And then we'll do the same thing on the right side. And as you can see, we're always moving groups of 3 over. I recommend for any decreases where you're doing more than 3 to move groups of 2 over, because otherwise it's just going to be a lot of stitches, especially when the amount we have on our needles gets to be much less. So now we finished our first repeat. So I'm just going to make a little note. I like to do it this way, and I just like to document what number of decreases I did. So I did 3 decreases. Okay, and now we start again, and I'm going to do a total of 7 repeats for this. So now I'm going to knit 2. And since my decrease number, which is 2.5, we just did 3, so now we're going to do 2. Keeping it in groups of 3 because it's 3 or less decreases. We move a group of 3 over, group of 3 over. And as you can see, we've reduced 2 stitches. And we'll do the same on the right. And now I repeat until I've done this total of 7 repeats for 14 rows. Okay, so now I've completed step 4 and on to step 5. And we're going to knit RA rows, which was the same as the number of last rows, so 14 rows, just as normal. So now we are on to step 6. Here we are going to repeat step 4 the same way, except for here our decreases are determined by decrease 2R2 instead of decrease 2R1. And we're only going to do that until our row counter number here equals our value F. So that means I'm going to knit 2, do 1 repeat of step 4 because that will get me to 72. And then I'm going to do my decreases based on dec 2R2, which in this case, for me, instead of 2.5, it's 2. So I'm just going to do 2 decreases on both sides after knitting 2. And now we are going to move on to step 7. And step 7 is where we're going to start with the on-hold stitches for the collar. So this is for the right side only. So at this point your carriage should be on the right, and you want to set your carriage settings to the hold setting. We're going to move our sen F stitches to position E. So my value for sen F is 8. So the center 8 stitches I'm moving to position E, so that's 4 on both sides of 0. And then since we're just working the right side here, we're going to move everything on the left as well out into position E. And now we are going to repeat this pattern until we get to a total of our RHF rows, which for me is going to be 12. So first step in this repeat is knit 1. And your carriage should glide across the stitches on hold, just like that. And you're going to wrap your working yarn around the most edge stitch here. And then you're going to knit back. You're going to put 1 stitch out here into hold. And then we are going to check to see how many decreases we do on the right side here, which is determined by decrease 2R2, or dec 2R2, which in this case is 2. So we don't have to worry about switching back and forth for this one. We're just going to do 2 each time. And I write it on my piece of scratch paper. 2. And now we repeat again, so we're going to knit 1. Wrap. Back. Put this out into hold. Decrease 2. Okay, knit 1, wrap, knit back, hold, stitch, decrease 2, knit, wrap, knit back, 1 on hold, decrease 2, knit, wrap, knit back, 1 on hold, and now you'll see we can't really do what we did before. If I move this one over, it's going to be right here. So we're going to start using 2 instead of 3. Okay, and then knit, wrap, knit back. And normally we would put 1 on hold and decrease 2, but I'm going to start with decreasing 2 and then we will put 1 on hold. For your last repeat, I always start with the decrease and then do the hold stitch. And here you can see that even doing 2 won't really work for us, so we're going to start with just using 1 transfer tool and then 2. So this one here goes over, this one here goes over. And now we put this one on hold. And that's the end of the right side. So you might as well put this remaining one on hold as well, because we will not be knitting it anymore. So we're going to cut our working yarn because we are done with the right side. And we're going to move our carriage over to the left. Whoop. Now we want to take a look at our left side stitches here. So we want to leave our center 8 on hold as well as all the right side ones on hold. So what I do is I look for our center 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all of these stitches to the left need to be put back in work with our transfer tools. And sometimes I count again just to make sure. So 1, 2, 3. Oop. So you can see this one should have been out like that. So that's why I double count. So remember it's 8, so 4 on both sides of 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then whatever's left on the right side. And now we're just going to repeat all the same stuff we did on the right side, but on the left. Oh, fuck. Okay, and here you can see I forgot to move these guys back out of work. So I'm going to take them out of work real quick. And then we will just kind of do this. Reset our machine. And move our row counter back 1. Okay, and now we are done, and we're going to cast off with this with waste yarn. And it's pretty important you cast off using enough rows of waste yarn, because the last thing you want is for your stitches to drop and you have to start all over from here. So you want to set your carriage back to just N, and then you just knit across with your waste yarn. There we go. And now the steps for the back panel are pretty much exactly the same. They just have slightly different values that you use when you do them, which you can get those values from the Google Sheet. Now we're going to work on the sleeves. So we're going to take our color 2 yarn, I'm choosing black, and we're going to cast on COS stitches. So for me that's going to be 62, so 31 on each side of the 0. And we're going to immediately jump into a decrease repeat. So we're going to repeat this for a total of RA rows. So we're going to knit 2. And then we are going to decrease each side determined by dec S1, which for me is 1.5. So I'm going to start by decreasing 2. going to mark that in my notes. 2. And I'm going to knit 2. And then I'm going to decrease 1. On both sides. And now we just continue with the pattern. Okay. Decrease 2. Decrease 1. There we go. And now I'm going to knit RA rows as normal. So I'm going to knit 14 rows just as normal. And now we're on to step 4. This is basically another decrease row, just as normal. We're not going to worry about putting anything on hold for the shoulders. So we are going to repeat this pattern a total of RA rows. I'm going to knit 2, and then I'm going to do a number of decreases on each side determined by the value dec S2. So in my case, it's 1.5 again. So I'll knit 2, and then decrease 2. Knit 2, decrease 1, knit 2, decrease 2, knit 2, decrease 1, okay, our final thing of decreases. Alrighty, and now we just cast off with waste yarn and repeat the exact same stuff to get another sleeve. So this is how we're looking right now. And just keep in mind that nothing's been blocked yet, so it's all gonna kind of fray out in a weird direction, but it's gonna look better once we block it. So our next steps is we are going to seam up 3 of our 4 seams. We wanna leave 1 undone so that later when we put this back on the machine, we can put it back on flat. So choose 3 of these to seam up, and then we will work on the collar. Okay, so as you can see here, I have seamed up the shoulder pieces up to the stitch markers that we placed in. And then once we're done making the collar, what we'll do is you connect these and you seam the rest of the body panel down. So I just left them unseamed for now, that part. And I picked up every stitch that we had placed on hold around the neckline, making sure that our fabric is wrong side facing. So I'm just going to put a few weights on. Okay, and then you can take the color of your choice. I would go with color B since it's like your accent color. And set your row counter back to 0. And I like to go either a half dial or a full dial smaller than your regular tension. So my tension dial was on 4, so I would either go 3.5 or 3. And I'm going to knit 6 rows. Okay, and then see if you like this thickness. This is essentially the thickness that your collar would be. So if it's a little too thin for you, do a couple more rows. If you like it, then you're good. And now we're gonna knit our turning row. So I go way out. I'm setting my tension dial to 6. You knit 1 row. Then set your tension dial back to where it was before and knit 6 more rows, or however many you did in the first part. So don't cut your working yarn just yet, just leave it for now. We're going to push every other stitch, just like this, out into work. And I would make sure you leave your edge stitches. So if you have a weird number of stitches and this would be out, I would make sure, even if you have 2 in the row, just keep your very edge stitches in. You don't want to drop those. And then we'll just work one by one, drop each stitch, and work it back up with our latch hook. So after you drop your stitch all the way down, you're going to take your latch hook, insert it into the stitches that you use to pick up. Make sure you get all of them. Any ones that you miss will potentially be dropped in the future when you take off your waste yarn, so make sure you just have all of them. And we're just going to pull through each row above this. All right, and now you just do that for every single one of these little guys that you have out. So now that we've finished adding the ribbing, we are going to fold this over. And the way that we do that is we pick up the stitches from our waste yarn and we just put them on the corresponding row. All right, and then we're going to cast off. This is a time when you can use some stretchy elastic, either like elastic thread like this or some like nylon cord, and just skip using the yarn altogether and replace it with nylon cord. That's really up to you and your preference. The stretch will help it sit a little bit more snug to you and like stretch over your head easier. Now we just cut our working yarn and pull through. I like to use this to seam up the side, so I make sure it's at least as long as the side panel here. and then you just pull through here. All right, next step, we just seam up this neckline here. You can also put some elastic, like nylon cord in the top, like you can thread it through the tube that you made to get this top part to lay flat against you if you're having difficulty getting it to lay flat just by blocking. It also helps it stay stretchy over time. So I'm going to finish seaming this up and blocking it, and I will show you the final product. So here is the finished product, baby tee. I of course did mine a bit cropped. You could go longer if you want to. If you did anything really fun and interesting with your baby tee, I'd love to see it. So just tag me in a picture. I'd love to check out what you guys make with the pattern. If you're looking for the pattern, you can find that on Etsy at Real Studios. And if you have any like knitting questions, knitting machine questions, I'm super happy to answer those. Just drop those in the comments and I will get back to you. Probably with a long explanation that is not typically reserved for YouTube comments, but I like to give a lot of information because I feel like it can be really hard to find knitting machine information, especially on YouTube. So, anyways, if you liked the video and maybe want to see other ones like it, you could consider subscribing. Regardless, I hope I see you all later. Bye.